A stepmom that makes Cinderellas look good, ketamine, stealing puppies, and alienation. All this and more right now.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.
Hello, my remarkable friend. Welcome to this episode of the podcast. Today, we have an episode that is really hard to listen to. Not because our guest isn't remarkable or wonderful, but because the trauma that she endured and talks about was so severe and twisted, it's just difficult as a moral person to take in. So the explicit warning today is for content, and it's for some of the comments I make, not the guest. We are going to talk about how this individual was groomed by her step-parent to believe horrible things about her mother that weren't true, herself, and as you'll see, all sorts of nasty, disgusting circumstances. She's going to talk to us today about how there's hope that when you go through this, it's not the end and that you can recover. So today's guest is going to take us through her journey, and she's going to show us how even though this was traumatic and even though this is off the charts crazy, what happened to her in so many ways. You can overcome childhood molestation. You can overcome alienation. You can overcome adultery in your marriage. You can overcome having people steal from you. There's all sorts of knowledge, and at the same time, it's a riveting story. So get your pens and paper, get your favorite cup of coffee or a cigar, and check out this episode of the podcast now, the Lisa Goodpaster story. Hey, Lisa, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Man, I am fantastic. And I was just telling our listeners a little bit about you and what to expect in this episode. But before we get started with your journey, if you were to talk to the listeners, and you're going to guarantee them that obviously they're going to get gold all along the way through your life story and things that they can not only be entertained with, but they can apply to their lives and better themselves. But if they were to walk away with one message, that if they listen to this entire episode, what is that message going to be that you guarantee they're going to get?
You are not what happened to you. You are not your traumas. You are not the dark things that come into our life and kind of mess with our mind and our body. That every single human that suffers, there is a way through so that you can live a more fulfilling whole life.
All right, amen. So then let's do this. Now, as a listener, you know a huge life lesson that most of us need, right? Lisa's going to take us through her life from her birth, her upbringing, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. We'll go through her teen, her adolescence, her adulthood to today. And then at the end of the episode, we'll not just hear her story of where she's been, but we'll transition to where is she today and where's she going. So now we can get behind her and connect and continue the conversation. So Lisa, let's talk about your origin story. Where were you born? Brothers, sisters, mom, dads, aunts, uncles, where were you at? And what was life like?
I was born in Silicon Valley, San Jose, California. And both my parents legally immigrated here from two different countries. And they met, had me, got divorced. And my mom is Latina. My dad is from Central America. So big family. And I was a latchkey kid. I thought my parents just had a bad divorce. And I was one of those kids who just thought my parents divorced. And it was a lot worse than divorce. And what happened to me is happening to millions of kids right now.
So, and then when you say that, were there any brothers or sisters? You were an only child.
And so I'm the only child between my mom and dad, but I do have a brother with my mom and my stepdad, and I have two siblings as well with my dad and stepmom. But they're half technically, but they're like whole to me. So yeah, I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest
Okay.
of,
And
yeah,
then when did your mom and dad get divorced? How old were you at that point?
I was four.
Okay.
I was 4 years old. And then both my parents got remarried when I was around seven.
Okay. So those fundamental, they say the first day, but no, study after study has shown that the first 5 years is pretty impactful for creating us and our foundation of who we are. That doesn't mean we can't change, but it's super, and super.
Non-negotiable.
Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, it really helps form how we think and our worldview. So for your
Yes.
first 4 years, I take it then your mom and dad were probably, arguing, not in a good place. It wasn't a Brady Bunch kind of marriage, right?
I don't remember my parents together. I don't have any memories. I have very little pictures. I remember the divorce. I remember the separation, the moving from a house to like an apartment, not seeing my dad regularly. I remember always looking out, where my dad was at, or when you grow up that way, your foundation is like shattered, and this is why it's so important. And we'll get into it later, but yeah, my parents divorced when I was four, and like most kids from divorce that are four, it's very confusing. It's very confusing, and a lot of things go on for kids, especially in this very like sacred time, because that's when your child's body and brain is growing rapidly.
Yeah. And then so when this happened, you get divorced, and you mentioned being a latchkey kid, and I always associate that with a teenager or an older kid. But at what point were you getting home from school and just going to the house by yourself?
Gosh, I would say sixth grade, sixth, seventh grade, and that was bad. We can get into that soon, but that was when I went to live with my dad. And that's when all kinds of crazy went on for me as a child.
Yeah, I can
So,
imagine. So yeah, let's just bring us through. So
okay.
you're born, your mom
So,
and your dad get together. Around four, they divorce. Then you go into an apartment. You're not seeing your dad much. So just bring us through your journey.
yeah. So, it's typical. You have, one parent is super strict, the other parent is like Disneyland. You're always kind of caught in between. Lisa has to do this, or no, I want Lisa to have fun. So, there was always, my parents both had the same goals, just completely different methods. And so when your parents divorce, like for me, it was like just I wanted to be with my dad. So at about seven, between the ages of 7 and 13, I went to live with my dad. It was only supposed to be for a week. Probably every parent that's listening that knows, oh no, I can I go stay with my dad for a week? My mom needed her car was broken and it needed work. And my dad was like, let her come with me. And I was like, yay. Just couldn't wait to jump in that car, grab whatever I could. And my soon to be stepmom was sitting in the front seat and I jumped in the back. And I'll never forget. She's like, we just dropped you off. Why are you coming back? And I went, I'm going to stay with you guys for a week or 2 weeks. And it turned into almost 7 years. So
Wow.
seven,
Now,
8, 9, 10.
what
Yes.
caused that time? Did you decide I don't want to see mom? Was it your dad's like, no, you're staying here? Like, how did that all transpire?
So from, I guess the way I remembered it, it was like I did not want to be around my mom. As soon as I was with my dad, because I was a little kid, I guess my dad didn't have the same type of rules as my mom. And it took like about 2 weeks. I did not want to go back. And the longer I stayed away from my mom, the harder it was for me to actually even want to be around her. And so, for your audience that's listening, I spent more time with my stepmom between the ages of 7 and 13 than I did with either of my parents.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
yeah. So, when we talk about co-parenting and everyone knows how messy it could be when parents don't get along, my stepmom uh, had a was is very ill, and the only way she could accept me was this: she turned me into an evil stepchild. And because I was so close to my dad, I had an insecure attachment. Basically, I felt like I had to protect my dad. So, and my stepmom was very jealous of my relationship with my dad. And instead of, you know, supporting both my parents and like say she should be with her mom because I don't really like kids. She's not my responsibility. She pretended to care because kids don't know. And that's when the brainwashing started to happen, was when I was about 8, 9 years old. And my stepmom wrote a kind of a story that started at my birth. So when you're growing, basically your brain is like brand new, right? So it's like you're building a foundation. So this is why it's so important that kids see both parents. So when I didn't see my mom and all I would hear was the bad things that my mom was doing or complaining, it started to sink in my head that I had a bad mom. And really, what happened was my stepmom wrote my entire life story to suit her needs. So, for example, like my mom, apparently, when I was born, my mom lost a lot of blood and needed a blood transfusion. That was normal back in those days. Well, my stepmom wrote, Lisa was so evil, she almost killed her mom coming out of her, body. Like, my mom gave birth to an evil baby.
Mm.
So she completely it disintegrated any aspect of a loving mother and daughter relationship. So between 7 and 13, there was a lot of bad things that happened. It wasn't just divorce. There was molestation. There was It was hell.
Now,
Looking back now,
molestation from your father, from your stepmom, from
three,
neighbors.
three, three different men. Three different men. One was a cousin that was from New Orleans on my dad's side. Another was my dad's friend from work, and the other one was my stepmom's father.
Man, those.
All in front, not in front of. Well, there were times when the one of them, my I guess he would be my step grandfather, would get really touchy feely and drunk. And one time my stepmom said, I don't like the way my dad's looking at you when he's drinking. Stay away from him. Not telling my mom, not telling my dad, here's me. Now I don't see my mom. My dad's always working. I'm with a woman who's 10 years younger than my dad. So, which is only like, if I'm 7, I mean, she was 26. So 26, 27, 28. She was doing whatever she wanted to do to make sure that I was scared. I felt that I had a bad perception of myself and my parents. It's really this is a when people read what I had to read, and other psychologists have said it was like she wanted to turn me into a psychopath. So when I say psychopaths, things psychopaths do is, one, they have a fascination with fire, right? They like to mutilate animals. They kill. They have they're off. We know this. We know that there's psychopaths and sociopaths. Well, she definitely fits the mold, because when people have studied what was rewritten and what I had to read and what changed my perception of my mom, it was very clear. Everything that she wrote about me, like trying to burn my brother and sister alive. I kill my mom in this story, in her narrative, and my stepdad. It's disgusting. It's pure evil, pure evil. And
Mhm.
the fact that I grew up to prove it is pretty crazy. But when you're with someone for so long and you're entrusted, your parents leave you with this person, you don't know any different. You know it's wrong. And when they tell you, if you say something, you're going to get in trouble. So going back to the molestations, yeah, those all three men that violated me all died pretty significant deaths before I turned 15,
Good.
including her.
Good. I hate to say it. People like be forgiving, like, screw you.
No,
Listen,
no, he was
if they do bad
decapitated.
things, yeah, that's good for them.
Yep.
They deserved it. And they got to face eternity with God or without God. So
And yeah,
pedophiles, rapists, people who do
yeah,
vile things like that. I mean,
yeah.
God loves them. But if they're on
Right.
this earth, the rate of actual, what's the word, rehabilitation is like
Yes.
almost nothing. And
Yeah.
even if you forgive them, the people I've met that actually I believe did have a change of heart, they said I
Right.
belong in here. I don't belong outside of this prison because I could change and I'm gonna ruin another child. So it's
Yeah.
like, anyways, going back, I'm truly sorry you had all that happen, Lisa. And now when you use the term she wrote this, did you're not saying she physically wrote a script, but there was a
She,
script she
oh,
was playing in your
she
head over.
physically, she typed it out, wrote it,
Oh,
left
she
it out.
physically.
Oh yeah, it's in my book, and we'll talk about it later. But yeah, I even have it here. Yeah, it is. There's notes all over it, and it is. I don't even know how many times I read it, but I do know that on one of the back of the pages, I wrote "Hi."
Did she
Like,
make you read it, or is this saying when you got older you
she
decided to
said
read it?
things. She left it out where I could find it, and she said things that were directly from it. So, did she make me read it? She didn't force me to read it, but she never told me that it was all made up. Like, she literally rewrote the script. And when you talk about how people actually believe the lies that they write, that's exactly what happened. Exactly.
And I don't want to get ahead of myself and get ahead of you and your story, but it sounds like she was probably twisted and damaged by her father, your step grandfather. I mean,
You
do you
would think, right? Yes, you would think. And her, she idolized her father, which is really freaky, which is really sick. But she didn't have a good childhood. That still doesn't excuse what she did. This is why this is so important to talk about, because we have a very little time to raise our kids, and when we don't know how the body and brain work, and how time and what's really going on for our kids, when we are detached from that as parents, when you're going through a divorce and you're not present, your kids suffer at such a significant rate. They don't realize it because we grow up thinking it's normal, and it's not. So the one good thing that she was stupid enough to do was kept this script that she wrote while she was a mother, by the way, too. While she was raising her own kids, she wrote this. And she writes about her own kids being molested and hurt. That's a different type of human, because the mother, there's no parent would ever, we don't even want to think about something like happening to our kids. It's like, but to actually write that, type it, I mean, it's yeah, it's definitely
She
wants to be
had
studied by a
issues.
lot of people. Huh?
Yeah,
What's that?
she has definite issues. That's
Oh, yeah. And it took a long, this is what's so crazy about my, and I wouldn't say crazy, but just fascinating about my story is that it took 40 years to uncover this. So when you're 7 to 13, right? So I was peeing in my pants. Let's see, at about third grade, I was peeing in my pants. And that's when the molestations were probably one of the worst one because it happened in, I want to say at least 3 months at least where I was being violated and just this is no parent would want their child to have to go through this. However, what's really what's really interesting is that she knew because she was watching me while I won't say his name, but the one of the bad men, he was upstairs in this we had my bedroom was upstairs and so was his. And so she was watching me the whole time. And there's just like cues and things that she would she would make funny sounds, or like if I did anything positive, she would like have to like put me down, like, oh, Lisa, you're gonna play soccer, you're gonna get fat legs. I don't have fat legs. Like, so she whatever thing, anything that I was natural at, I look a lot like my dad and my mom. She couldn't stand that. So there was so much that, and it was permitted. Like
I was going
it,
to ask you
it
about that. Like your father, did he have a good relationship with her? Was he always going to work? Did he just tolerate it? What was his,
so, oh man, my dad is like, his dad died when he was 4, came from another country. So
what
my
country?
dad he came from Honduras.
Okay,
He actually
Honduras.
he went straight into the army. He came from another country, went into the army. He was 18 years old. He met my mom when he was, I don't know, in their 20s. And he was really attached to me because I was his only family other than my mom and my mom's side of the family, because his family was in New Orleans and in Honduras and Miami. So when my dad went through the divorce, it was really traumatic for him. I mean, that's all he talked about. Like, he would call me in the morning, at night. I mean, he wanted to know, I love you. I am here for you no matter what. But that would kind of get my mom fired up because every time she was trying to like get me to do homework, my dad would call. And so it was like a lot of like co-parenting, like just mishaps, or I'm sure this happens. So when my stepmom got into the picture, my stepmom was very, very critical. So, and this is what parents do, or their significant others do. And my dad would just let my stepmom talk, and he really wouldn't say anything, but I could tell he would like put his head down, or he would just like ignore her. And I would look at my dad like, aren't you going to say something? You're a little kid, you're watching this. And so, I think my dad was trying to protect me. Like, this isn't, he didn't want to have arguments in front of her. But I guess he's one of those dads that put his head in the sand, because when you have other kids with, he had other kids with her, and now you have 2 little kids that are depending on him. So then what happens to the older one, the one that came from divorce? We become the scapegoat, the latch, the black sheep, apparently. And so I always just felt bad for my dad. I felt sorry for him. My dad would tell me, like, our only time we had alone was the 20 minutes he took me to drive me to and from school. It was the only time I really had time alone with them. Like, she controlled everything. And you see it even nowadays too. It's like men can't really, they don't know how to protect their kids. Like, what do you do? So when you see this growing up and you're around so much dysfunction and you see adults just fail and not protect you every corner, it is terrible. And this is what every parent, and this is what happened to me, is kids from divorce, we don't realize because we've normalized divorce. Kids from divorce that are not with their parents and that go through trauma, whether it's molestation, bullying, what the definition of trauma is anything that overwhelms the mind, right? So there's a lot of things that go on for a little kid between 7 and 13. And when we have to process that trauma alone, and that's what kids from divorce do, because we shut down. We don't want to say that that man hurt me because he just said he's going to kick your butt, dad. We shut down. So that's sustained trauma. So ages 7 to 13 was sustained trauma. The first 7 years of my life were crucial. Thank God I'm Latina, because I always joke, like, you can't alienate a Latina, why? Because there's too many of us. So thank God for grandparents and aunts and uncles. It doesn't take place of your parents. But by the time I was 13, I went from straight fear, like where you pee in your pants, to angry, just angry. 13, 14, like complete, utter, like you hear teenagers are always rebellious. But when you have a teenager that has gone through trauma and doesn't even realize it's trauma, you become so protective over yourself. Everything in your life is about survival, and you don't even realize it. You're just growing up. You don't know. So it was really, really hard to, you don't get your life. You're basically like, it's like abuse hidden in plain sight.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't, it's hard to even listen to your story because it's like a bad horror movie. It's just
I,
twisted. I don't mean that in offensive in any way,
right.
but like as a
Yeah.
dad who loves his children, it's
Right. I
like
can see it in your face. Yeah.
yeah, it makes me feel like super angry and sick, and I can actually feel my brain wanting to shut down. I'm a
Yeah.
grown man who I consider myself reasonably healthy. So for you to process this as a child and some psychos raising you writing a script that's just perverse and twisted, yeah, it's
Yeah. I
amazing
didn't
that we're
process
sitting
it.
here.
Yeah, I just suppressed it. I would just take it. It's like it was like literally like Cinderella, except I didn't have the mice and the fairy godmother. I had aunts and uncles and cousins that everybody knew that she she wasn't very happy about me, but she played her part very well. She controlled everything.
Now go
Everything.
now the three men that harmed you directly, you said they all died separately, different ways, badly. Like,
Yeah. Hmm.
so you
Uh,
did you just hear about this, or were you in constant contact with them even after?
so the one that I talked about earlier that was staying with us with my dad and my stepmom, he was a relative. It was my dad's nephew. He ended up taking off. We had Doberman pictures, like there was a bunch of puppies that were born, and he stole a bunch of them. And I remember all this chaos going on around the house, and he took the puppies, and like, what happened? And they said his name. He left and he stole the puppies, and all I thought was, those poor puppies, what's he going to do to the puppies? But keeping it on the inside, right? And when you understand like what I read, whereas like she had me hurting puppies, she wanted me to mutilate animals, and so it was really hard to like feel empathy and fear for these puppies, and at the same time know that this person wanted me to, thought so bad of me that I would never have a puppy because you just kill it, Lisa. So it was like, it's very oppressive. It was a very oppressive way to grow up. And I didn't know, I didn't know any different because I was so young, but I knew it was wrong. And so I just did what I had to do to tolerate it. But by the time I was 13, 14, I started to fight back. I started to speak up. I started to get angry and get in trouble. And one night, I'll never forget it, I saw my dad take dark garbage bags, like the black ones,
Mm-hmm.
and all of my clothes, like all of my clothes, he was just putting in the car, all of my stuff, and all I had was clothes, by the way, too. And because in the years that I lived with them between 7 and 13, they had bought their dream house. Their dream house. I didn't have my own. I had my own room, but it couldn't be decorated. It was like I was always on probation. There's the daughter that is hi. She's got all these issues because her parents are divorced. So she was controlling everything. So at about when my dad went to take me to drop me off at my mom's, who by now I hadn't seen very much in 5 years, but I thought I had the worst mom in the world because I had read and I was told that my mom didn't change my diapers. My mom wouldn't feed me when I was little, all kinds of horrible things. So you drop me off at my mom's and I'm like, I don't want anything to do with you. Like I couldn't even look at my mom. So either whether it was at my mom's house or my dad's, I was never safe. I never felt secure with either of my parents.
Mm.
Yeah.
So what about, I'm typing notes, but when all this is going on, at what age, and this is not important, but circle back to the guy who raped you and stole the puppies. How did he die?
So he ended up getting hit by a car. He first he was in a wheelchair. Then he got into drugs and he died.
Okay. So it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. And you said
Mhm.
the other two also died by the time you were 15?
Yeah, and then the second guy to violate me was in the swimming pool at my dad's house. And it was so awkward and uncomfortable because you're just like, I think I had to be like 11. Your body, you're just a little kid. And I remember him touching me in the water. It was really funny. Not funny, it was horrible. It was freaky. And there were people everywhere, like, just adults everywhere. And this man has me in the hot tub, because there's a pool and a hot tub. And I kept jumping in jumping in from the pool to the hot tub, get hot, then it would get cold. And he somehow got a hold of me and was doing things to me under the water. And when he said, if you say anything, I will kick your dad's ass. And you got to realize, like, the way that I grew up, it was like my dad was the only person that loved me. My mom didn't. That's what my stepmom had me believe. So, of course, I didn't say anything. So that guy, he is sick. He had a son who actually drowned in the pool, like within a year later. And then he died of some massive heart attack. Something bad happened. And then by the time I was 15, um, this is so bizarre, but my dad at the time was having surgery. He had some prostate thing that was not cancerous, but he still had to be hospitalized. And I remember just being super scared, like so scared. I'm upstairs alone. My dad's in the hospital. I don't know if my dad's gonna live because you're a kid, so it's very scary. And I remember going to the hospital with my stepmom, hearing the doctors, and I'm just like, want to know, is my dad gonna live? Is he okay? And we saw my dad, and then I went with my stepmom to pick up my brother and sister at her mom's. And I saw a bunch of people there and they were kind of talking in Spanish. And I'll never forget this. And I go, what happened? And she turned and she looked at me like this, like quick. I go, what happened? And she goes, my dad died. And I laughed. I busted out and laughed like like you're almost in a comedy, like laughed. And I couldn't
Mhm.
believe I laughed. And I like ran to the bushes because I had step cousins that I'm really close to. And that was their grandpa. And I was like, it was just so bizarre that I laughed. And I found out later in life that was relief.
Oh yeah,
That was
absolutely.
relief. But I didn't know that as a right. So then you're feeling bad. You go bad enough. You end up going. You go to Catholic school the first 6 years of school, and and then you know that your dad was saved because your stepmom said, "My dad died so that your dad could live." And I'm like, but
Yeah.
he got decapitated, and my stepmom did not tell my dad because he was in the hospital. But I remember not like, where was my mom? This was so much the mother of me because my son's 30 now, but I got to tell you, that was like, I'll never forget that. It was like I tugged on her like arm or something, like, what happened? And then everybody was crying. And I was just like, I was glad because I knew he was going to get my sister. And she was just a little girl. She was only like not even 3.
Yeah, and what you had to endure was just terrible, and how it was set up and orchestrated was horrible. But then there's also this, hey, three scumbags, you reap what you sow. They all got what they deserved. But I know there's people listening now who've also been molested and raped or had these horrible things happen, and their molesters are still living large and alive. The Jeffrey Epsteins, and the Joe Bidens and all these people who commit horrible crimes, and they just seem to get away with it. So, I don't want to be insensitive to those people, but at the end, God will always take care of his children, and the people who committed these atrocities will be judged, and they will not get
Yeah.
away with it. But I
Yeah.
thank you for being so honest and transparent and brave. And it's hard to talk about this. So thank you, Lisa.
I think it helped that it helped in one sense that they're no longer here, but it didn't help. I still had to tell my parents. I did tell my parents, and I remember telling my dad, and he was like, "What do you want me to about my father or his father-in-law?" And I remember saying, "This is what he did to me," and my dad was like, "What do you want me to do? He's dead. Like, dig him up and make sure." It was like 14 by 14 and 15. I was my parents had they didn't have any influence over me because and they didn't know what had happened. They didn't know. That doesn't come out till we'll talk about that later. But yeah, my that was just from there's all kinds of crazy stuff that I try to touch on. But when by the time I was 13 and 14, your lack of innocence is gone. Like
Hmm.
and you don't even know what that is because you haven't been in the world long enough. But when you're a teen, it really feels like you know what you're talking about, and you don't because you're missing the life experience. So it it's and it's very preventable. This stuff is preventable. We have to watch our kids, but yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. So where do you go from there? So now you love your dad. You don't realize it, but you love your mom. She was nothing really wrong. The stepmom's just absolutely filling your brain with lies. You got hard circumstances. You got three people now that molested you are now dead, thankfully. Where does your life go from there, Lisa?
So then I go to live with my mom, and I hadn't lived with her since I was 7, so I'm now like 14. And
And would you talk to her or see her for holidays or just no contact?
I would see her, but it was like every so often. It wasn't consistent, and I really wanted to see. I would see my grandparents and my aunts and cousins more than I would my mom. Um, until I was about 14, and then all I did was run away. I would run away. I would run away like my stepdad would. I would catch him like always writing signs like, missing. I was always running away and they couldn't figure out why. And of course, my stepmom and my dad and my mom, they wanted to have this meeting because Lisa is now being dramatic and we need counseling. And that was my stepmom's idea, right? So there I am at the table watching my mom, my dad, my stepmom, and my stepdad all sit there and talk about me, not knowing what had actually happened to me. And I'm watching my stepmom orchestrate everything. And internally, I'm thinking, why are they letting this person have so much access to my life? At 13, I'm going to let my dog. What's actually. So that was a real important memory for me because I just remember feeling so like it's like having your rapist right there constantly just hovering over you, and ended up going to counseling, and that never worked because they want to put you on a disciplinarian plan. They don't want to know, well, why are you acting like this? I kept thinking it was the divorce, and yeah, it was a divorce. My parents were divorced, but no, something really wrong was happening. And I was being brainwashed and abused and discarded so that someone like my stepmom can feel comfortable. And my dad knew that she was jealous of me. And it's like jealousy is it's a human thing, but this is beyond jealousy. This is
Oh
bad.
yeah. The level of psychosis to bring
Right.
you to a counselor. I mean,
Yeah.
she must have been a maniacal, like, I don't want to say maniacal genius, but she was diabolical and maniacal and absolute a strategist to be able to say, oh, I'm smarter than all these people and I'm going to lead them and be the puppet master and I'm going to BS this, counselor. So they think that Lisa's the problem and it's not me. I mean, that's just pure ass evil.
Right. And a lot of it, I mean, I'll share more as we get towards like, how this all unfolds.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Keep
so
going. Keep going.
yeah, so so then you're 15, by 16, that's when I had the insight to surround myself with really good friends. And most of my friends' families were intact, or they had parents that seemed to care at least more than, what I had at home. And I met my son's dad in high school, and I kind of just became his girlfriend and just hid all the stuff that I couldn't explain and that I hated. I just pushed down because that's what we do when what we suppress to survive. So it's like when you're going through it as a kid, you're enduring it, right? You're enduring it. You don't know any different because you didn't like take a class like this isn't supposed to happen to you, and if this does, this is what you should do. This was so bad. I figured my dad was the only person that really loved me, and my mom doesn't. So I have to rebel, and I didn't want to be like any of my parents. And so I couch surfed. I stayed at friends' house during the school week. By the time I was 16, by the time I was 17, I had my own car. And so I kind of just flip flopped like everywhere. And I never wanted to be around my mom or my dad. And I just survived. I just did whatever I had to do. I didn't do drugs. I didn't want, I didn't want to give my stepmom any more of my life, even though I couldn't explain it. I had to pretend like I liked her. Like it's called Stockholm syndrome. And like when you're a kid, you're just you kind of watch how your parents are, and then you either mimic what they're doing or you rebel. And when you rebel, like I did, I mean, sure, it's good to rebel, but it's like you rebel to protect yourself, but everything internally, you're suffering so much on the inside. This is why people numb themselves, right? Because it hurts and you can't explain it. So I was always trying to tell my parents, I was always trying to like explain, I'm not like this. Like my parents would see me in traumatic situations that were like, okay, she ran away. Let's go pick her up. Where it was never like, I'm going to go see Lisa score a goal like back before I was like 7 or 8. It was like everything got obliterated. I mean, I didn't even have my own room at my dad's. I
Yeah.
had my own room, but I didn't have it decorated. I just like a mattress on the floor, and I had like crates, and like the closet had organizers, but I couldn't hang posters or anything.
Yeah. You never had that sense of
It was
home
never, yeah,
security.
no,
Yeah.
no,
It's like
I was
living out of a
always,
suitcase in a hotel. It has
yeah,
everything you need, but it's not home.
right, right. And so I remember in high school, so I mean, I tried to like, I would get frustrated with with my stepmom, and there were times when I would just have to cave and let her violate me because I had no autonomy, no autonomy. And I remember my stepmom was going to school. She actually has her master's. She was a teacher. And before she became a teacher, she wanted to be a flight attendant. So she went to go apply, and she came back crying. And I noticed that she was, all like kind of dramatic and crying. And she's like, I didn't even get off the car because there was like 500 women and they were all prettier than me. And I must have just logged it like, oh, okay. So then I became a
Goal.
flight attendant. Yep. So then I became a flight attendant. Like, yeah, it was easy. I just went in and they hired me. And then I would just like get her in other ways. It's like one of my aunts she was really good black belt in karate. And my stepmom used to do karate, but she only got a red belt. So I would say, I'm going to go visit my aunt, the one with the black belt.
Yeah. Passive
So
aggressive, but it's what you could do. So
yeah,
now,
whatever I could do. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, any way that I can, control at least as much as I could, because then it would just get really awkward. And there were times when if you've ever been around women that like to gossip a lot,
yeah.
this woman liked to gossip, like, oh my God. And I remember thinking, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't even want to hear her. No matter where we went, she had to like debrief and talk about everything. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I can't stand this, but I'm just going to sit there and pretend like, oh, okay. But I couldn't stand it. Like there were things, and I never asked my dad, like, what do you see in her? Because you don't know, you don't understand the lifelong consequences of when your parents get married, and the step parents don't understand. And this is vital because what they do is they destroy the attachment to your parents. And that is anointed by God. We are as parents, we are entrusted with kids. We have them
Yeah.
for a very limited time. And so yeah, it's very sick how much a adult could hate an innocent child.
Yeah. And going back to that, like you can't just compartmentalize psychosis. So there's no way I can imagine her kids grew up, they were raised normal or grew up normal. So what was your
They
half?
grew up under the same narrative I did. Lisa was bad. Her parents divorced. Her mom was bad. Um, she was they would tell you she's a very good mom. And I suppose because that's their mom, no matter what, we love our parents, but they're parents now. And
But did she groom and control them also?
I
Not
think
maybe
so.
as abusive,
And
but I can't
she was,
imagine someone that sick not having an aspect to every relationship.
I definitely see it now, the way that she was with my sister. Like my little sister, was very close to her. But I used to see my sister say things like, as I got older, my sister would come to my house and visit, and she would say things like, "Oh wow, look, Lisa's like a really good decorator," and my stepmom would tell her to shut up, like in Spanish or like in English to like be quiet, Jessica. Like that's enough. Like she was very controlling, but in a different way. With my brother, my stepmom seemed to idolize him more than my sister. So my sister was like the middle child, and the kids are just they grew up under the same kind of the same way, but they were loved and nurtured, and at least they got more from, because that's their mom. But that's not a question for that's something for them to ever ask. But like I don't, because they were born into it. They were born into this. So they're innocent. They don't we don't talk right now because it once I found out how deep this went, I think eventually, maybe once she dies, you know, because I
Yeah.
do love them. I do love them. They're a part of they're part of me. I'm a part of them. We share the same dad, but I am so glad I share no blood with her.
Yeah. So
And
now
then
you're in high school. You haven't had
mhm,
any kind of help or guidance working through these traumatic issues
yeah.
and circumstances. Again, a healthy adult would have trouble dealing with one of them, let alone all of them, let alone doing this as a kid and having no training. So now you're in high school. You said you met your son's father. Was he in
Uh-huh.
high school also? Was he
I,
older? What
he
was
was
his?
he was younger than me. He was like I think he was like a year younger, the class lower than me. And
Okay.
we met in math class, and I had like an A in geometry. And then towards the end of the year, I had like an F. What we did was cut school. He was very popular. All the girls liked him. And I thought it was like he was protective over me. So I thought that was love. Like, look at that guy, look at you. That's not protection. That's being jealous. The kids don't know this. So he became like I guess I just became his girlfriend. And then I had really good friends that I would stay, at their houses. And even my really good friend, we're all still good friends now. And they're like, remember when Lisa would spend the night for like a month? Like, because I never wanted to be, I didn't want to be, I felt safer at my friend's house than I did at my dad's or my mom's. Like, so you're talking, it was a lot. And there were times when like something was off, but I didn't know it was trauma. I didn't know that, they talk about like how you had said earlier, like, oh, I want to shut my brain off. Yeah, that's what the brain does when it gets uncomfortable out of protection, because it's hard to, so I imagine, I mean, I just listened to music, TV, I stayed busy. And then by the time, I think by the time I was like 19, I was pregnant and got married, and we ended up getting to live in Hawaii. So what helped me was I got the hell away. Once I
Mm.
got away, I never went back. I didn't want to ever go back.
And before you got married, did you share with him your past or did you just keep it quiet?
You mean to my parents or to
No, no,
my
no. So you're getting married, and even though you're
uh-huh.
young, did
uh
you share with him all the stuff that happened to you in the past, or did you just, nope,
So
this is
I
who
would
I
say things like, I don't want to talk about it. I had a step, like people go like, so your parents, who are your parents? Or, you you go through the introductions, and this is what I would say. My parents divorced. It sucked. I had a bad stepmonster. That was it. Like I couldn't even entertain it. Like I wanted out. So I was looking ahead. And as soon as I knew that I was going to be a mom, it was like something changed and I was like steady and fearless. And I knew I was going to raise my child complete opposite from what was you're going to get from than what happened to me. And that's exactly what I did.
Okay,
And
so now you guys go to Hawaii. So I'm guessing military, or how did you guys get to
yeah, he was in
Hawaii?
the Coast Guard. And
Okay. Yeah.
luckily it was like, yeah, we're gonna get to live in Hawaii. And our son was 5 months old. And I remember going to the airport and like my grandma, my mom was there, my dad was crying, and I'm like, get me on that freaking plane. I want to get the hell out of here. And I never wanted to look back. And I
Yeah.
just pushed it all down because I was in mom mode. I was always in and out of counseling, just trying to figure out with things, especially when we got to Hawaii, because then Frank and I started to fight a lot, right? We started to argue, like he was a handsome guy, he was a young guy. And, I was feisty and I didn't want to be hurt by anyone. So we would argue, we'd have these, we'd have these little tit for tats, and we ended up having to get divorced, which was, worked out for the best, but we always co-parented. But I'll never forget being in Hawaii and having to go to counseling and the counselors looking at us because Matt's dad was only 19 when we got married. So that's young, right? We're young kids. I mean, I know my son's like, I don't know. Oh, you were so young. And I'm like, yeah, but it was like everything to me. I remember being in counseling and the counselors looking at, my son's dad and then looking at me, and she's like, you got a lot of growing up to do. And she looked at me, she goes, you pick really bad men. And I'm like, that's it? That's all that's happened? That's it? No way. Like I was like, huh? Like so it was yeah. So it was right after the first divorce was when really started to go into counseling, and it was always, would just lead back to the divorce, but all of the different counselors, like I didn't really remember. I had like pushed down a lot of the trauma.
And that's natural. That's sadly the norm in a lot of ways. People suppress it. They don't remember it. I mean, how many people have gaps in their memories from trauma?
Right.
They truly don't understand. They don't remember, like that never happened, and it did get, they're just suppressing it.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so now you're married, you're in Hawaii. Just pick
Mm-hmm.
up and
Thought
we'll
it was
walk
going
right
to
through
be
your story.
fabulous. Yeah. And it was reality. It was, in one aspect, it was good because I was surrounded by you come from California and then now you're living with people from Oklahoma, Texas, all over Florida, all over the world. And it was like a community because you're part of like the military. And, it was there were some very sweet, tender times. And then there were moments where we were so young and so immature. And, we would have ended up just hurting each other, and it would have been horrible for my son. So we divorced when he was 4, which was the same age as I was when I was a kid. But
Hmm.
there was no way I was going to not, he was going to have a relationship with both of his parents. And was never going to leave my son with a step parent. Like I was, just wanted to give him a good start.
Yeah.
That was all I ever wanted. Like that was it. Like I didn't even, usually, I mean, yeah, I became a flight attendant, but I mean, I just wanted to give him a good start. And you're raising your son, and now you have stepmom who hated me, and now she didn't like that my dad was a grandpa because it made her uncomfortable because she was 10 years younger than him. So she has all kinds of issues. And she would like forecast him on everyone else. but you can just, it was so bizarre, but I'll never forget. I was visiting my dad, and it's bad. After getting a divorce, I went to go visit my dad, and I pull up, and my son is in the car with me in his car seat, and my dad comes out of the house. And this is before cell phones, and he's like, she's being crazy in there. She says she doesn't want you in the house because you're evil. Like my dad thought it was ludicrous. And I knew exactly what her mind and how she was, because by now I was already in my mid 20s. My son was 4 or 5. And I looked at my dad and I thought, all right, I tolerated this when I was a kid, but not now, not with this kid. And I remember thinking, God, I want to go up there and pull her by her hair and drag her out of that house. And keep in mind, the script that she wrote was still in that house, in the same place it had been since I had read it for like
Did you
17
ever
years.
did you ever tell your dad about this script
Oh,
at this
yeah.
point?
Oh yeah. That comes later.
No,
So
but I'm saying
here,
at this point, like
no, he
between
didn't
your
know.
so to this point, you're 20 mid, let's just say 24, 25, you're at the house
Mm-hmm.
with your son. She's like, she's evil and she can't come in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And but to this point, your dad has no idea what the script.
No, and my dad is just like, I don't know what the hell's wrong with her. And I remember, because I got out of the car, and I remember just, the cars, the air conditioning's on, the windows are rolled, and my son's right there. And I remember just thinking, God, I want to like pull her hair, bring her down. And I didn't, because I saw this little kid staring at me, and I knew, like, you know what? I'll go to jail. That lady is the one that needs to be in jail. But I couldn't put it all together because I was so disappointed that my dad couldn't say, hey, you know what? You get out of here. Go for a drive. My daughter and my grandson are going to come in. If you don't like it, get out. And the fact that he couldn't do that or say that, it just reinforces the false belief that you're not good enough to even come in this house. So I went, I think by that time I was living in the Bay Area. And my mom, by this time, my brother was born. My brother and I are 20 years apart. And my brother, Vince, and I are real close. And I think the biggest reason is my stepmom did such a good job as erasing my past, but she didn't count on all the love that was coming my way, like
Mm-hmm.
having like a relationship with my little brother, right? So my mom, when here I am, a young mom, and my mom was a mom again. So I didn't feel like I could go to her. So it was just a shit show. It was terrible. And that's when I started applying with airlines, and I got hired. And by 26, I was flying. By 27, I was already engaged. And that's when I met my second husband, and we were married for over 21 years. And I married a pilot. And we joke, like, we look back now, like, oh, I could see how I would have these like responses or these like trauma reactions. And they were always like at bullies, or like Greg is my ex-husband's name, but he would be like, oh my God, I'm picking up Lisa at the airport. The cops are there. Like, what happened? Like, who did she get in a tango with? Because it was like I was fearless. Like you're a bad person and you're breaking the law and you should go to jail. So I was always like, there's like an injustice that you feel when you grow up this way. So you look at the world like that is bad and that's good and that should never happen. And so it was always like disproportionate reactions I would have with it. Just, like, I think one time somebody got drunk on an airplane, and the cops had to come. There's just, I was fearless, and I was also just, I guess I just got to the point where you get so sick of all the wrong that happens, you don't want to see it happen to anyone at any time. So I'm really grateful for the 21 years that I did have with Greg. That, our marriage served a purpose. And so, I start about Matt was in the second grade, and grandma was watching him. When I say grandma, I mean my ex-mother-in-law. She said, I'll watch him for you while you fly. And it was like the perfect scenario, but grandma was doing my son's homework and my son wasn't reading. My son was memorizing books, but he wasn't reading. And I remember the teacher saying, Lisa, if he doesn't read, he's gonna be held back. And I saw my childhood just kind of like flash before me. Like, why am I flying? I need to be present. This is BS. And everyone loved my job. My job was perfect for everyone except for my son. Because even for me, right, when you think about a kid from divorce, we're used to packing and, you get to fly all over the world and you can just be a gypsy and ignore the things that make you uncomfortable. And as soon as I saw that my son needed stability, he needed a good start, I quit. We moved and I never looked back. And I put my son first. I moved him, I think his first from the third to sixth grade, he had male teachers. He was always in sports. So I was an active mom, protective until my son was a wrestler, until he finally like, Mommy, you don't have to protect me anymore. Like, I remember telling my husband, give me 10 years. Like, he comes first. Even when my husband, or he wasn't my husband yet, even when we met, I said, meet me at Chuck E. Cheese and bring quarters and let's see how this works. But like, I never even dated. I didn't bring any men around my son. I was really like, because I remember what it felt like as a kid. We remember what we feel. It's hard to articulate, but you don't forget those feelings. It's like when you listen to a song and invokes all these like good memories. It's kind of like that. So that's what I did.
So now you're in this marriage and then your son's growing up. And is there anything else that happened? Because obviously you said he's your ex-husband now.
Mhm.
So where between when you got divorced, what led up to that divorce? And is there anything else we missed significant or we just move up to that point?
We had like my life was pretty idyllic, like compared to like what I had, like where I came from. I mean, I thought, I'm not kidding. It was like idyllic. I was spoiled. I was loved and it was great. It was my best friend. Then there were things that, 'cause he was a little older than me. I wouldn't say a little, he was like 13 years older than me. And there were things that I noticed. It was like I loved him, but I also was uh, unraveling a lot, especially soon as my son graduated from high school. It was like my body and brain went boom. Like, now what? Like, it was like I had been on high octane from the time I was like 7. I mean, probably even before then, right? I was just like on high octane. And then I had a good like 15, 17 years of just like pretty much idyllic. I mean, I had like some, cycling accidents, just life, just regular life hits, nothing too traumatic. And then, well, we became empty nesters. And I remember just feeling feeling really lost, feeling like really lost. Like I thought it was just like late postpartum depression that you get when because my son was now out of the house. He was 18. Like, what do I do? I'm so young.
And before
And
you go on, when you say empty nesters, did your son and your second husband connect well? Were
mhm.
they amicable or were they like distant?
No, Greg was a really good stepdad in the sense that he was very respectful to Matt's dad. There was one time, and I will never forget this if your audience is listening, maybe your girlfriend or spouse. There was one time, and this is funny. I we wanted to get our first dog, and I wanted a dog. Like, I guess I didn't have much patience. And he's like, Lise, there's no dogs yet. Like, I get you a Chihuahua, but we want a lap. Fine. And I was like throwing a fit. Like, I was acting like a brat. I'm not kidding. And my son was like behind me. And I'm not kidding. This was like so weird. It was like so weird, and like the sense of, wow, I've never heard that before. I was being a brat, a spoiled brat. No, I want a dog now. Oh, like I was just being ridiculous. Like, and I remember Greg at the time he was looking at me, and then he looks at Matt and he goes, "Hey, Matt, can you go wait in the car for us?" He goes, "Okay." And Matt goes in the car. And this was the only time this ever happened. And he goes, "Don't you ever yell at me in front of Matt ever again." And it was like, and I instantly had like respect. It was like, was I testing him? Because it kind of felt like I was testing him, like, oh, that's kind of manipulative. Why would I test him like that? So little things that I would find myself doing, it would always kind of like, God, why would I do that? Like, that hit me at such a significant level. I can't even tell you. I don't know if it's probably because the way my dad was a dad, he didn't say anything, he just put his head in the sand. But Greg was like, and that was it. Like, I never, ever acted like that ever again, because it was like kind of checked me. And that was a good thing. So that was like probably one of the first signs that, like, wow. So Greg would know he was really good. He was like, and he was gone a lot too. So it was good in the sense it was good for my son and I because we had our own time together. And then, then it was good when my son was gone, and then, Greg and I would have our time. But it was always, Matt was always a priority, always. And I'm grateful that he never, I mean, I'm not kidding. Like, when you have teenagers, like they crash cars, stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
And like, God, like they even, Matt and and Greg both got sued because it's just insurance of an accident. My son didn't do anything wrong. It's just what people want to do. They like to sue. And he didn't complain. He never got stressed out, like, and said, Matt was being irresponsible. He was like calm and steady for a long time. And then he took a nosedive, like literally. Like, what happened was, well, I started to unravel. So now we're in let's see, Matt is in college, and I started to get really sick. In 2008, I was it was road racing, right? The skinny bikes with the flips. And I was
Mm-hmm.
road racing, and I was going down a hill at 36 miles an hour, and my tire came off the rim, and there
Mm.
was nothing I can do. They train you to fall, but not going downhill. And you lose all like it's like the steering wheel completely just is so movable. You're like, what is going on? It's like, what do I do? Do I clip in? Do I clip out? Do I clip in? And I flipped out and I flew, and I hit the pavement. I hit like this. Anyways, I ended up shattering my clavicle, massive concussion, broke my neck. Didn't know that I had broken my neck, by the way. It was so bad. The doctors wouldn't touch me for like 2 weeks. The helmet saved my life. And I remember the way that I handled childhood trauma, same way I handled trauma as an adult. I pushed it down. I'm okay. I'm okay. Here I'm at the hospital. I'm just I'm on my face. I mean, everywhere. It's bad. It's really bad. And I remember like, I'm fine. I can go home. I want to go home. I had no business going home, but luckily I was young. I had a couple surgeries. And then you fast forward from 2006 to about 2015, 2016. And I start hanging out with my dad and my stepmom and my siblings because I was always kind of in and out of family. I would
Mm-hmm.
still go visit and see them, but I would like tolerate my stepmom's BS. And there were times when I would, I mean, God, I remember I would break out in hives and rashes. It's 2016. And everyone's like, oh, you just have menopause. Like I'm sweating. And I'm like, no, this isn't right. And I remember looking at my stepmom and going, I don't feel right. Can you help me? Like I did not feel right. And she's like, just breathe. Let's go into the office. Just lay down. I'm talking to my stepmom, and my body is like breaking out in welts. At this time, my sister gets engaged, so we have a big wedding to prepare. So of course, you do what families do. You go and you hang out and you celebrate weddings. Well, um, I got really sick, even worse, to the point where this wedding that we went to was in Vegas. And when we got to Vegas, I looked at my husband. I'm like, I was 42. Why do I feel 92? Like my body was just shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
Went to the doctor when I got home. Greg's like, take an x-ray of her neck. Not only did I have x-rays, but I had like, it's called libido, right? All this spotting all up my legs. It was bad. And they're like, Lisa, they took a neck x-ray and they're like, Lisa, your neck looks like it was broken twice. But we don't want you to do anything. You're going to need surgery right away. What? Yeah, you broke your neck. It's bad. So, because I was dropping things, I couldn't even hold this. Like, it would just drop. Like, this is like, what is going on? Thought I had rheumatoid arthritis. 2 days later, my husband went to clean the shed. And lo and behold, he found the script. Remember the script that I read when I was little?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happened was in 2008, after I had my accident, I had remembered that I had been molested. I had remembered I kept saying, Dad, I called my dad crying. I'm like, Dad. And he's like, yeah, I need you to do me a favor. Okay. I need you to get me the proof. And he's like, proof? What are you talking about? I'm like, Dad, I need this. This is really important. Go into your bedroom. It's like been 17 years. Go into your bedroom, look underneath your wife's nightstand, and bring it to me if it's a book, and it'll have my name on it. And he did. He brought it to me. And it's a book. It was what she had typed 58 pages. And I remember I took it to my Christian counselor at the time. He read it and he said, Lisa, this is evil. Throw it away. That was all the validation I needed in 2008 because I was still in mom mode. And I was like fearless mom mode. Like I wasn't going to address anything. I seriously wanted to give my son the best way possible was a good start. And I didn't want to dig into things that I wasn't ready. So I came home and I told my husband, the doctor said it was pure evil to throw it away. So I thought he put it in the garage and I would go look for it occasionally, never found it. But in 2016, when my husband went to clean out the garage and I was really sick, he found it and he uploaded it. And around the same time, my mom had called me, and my mom and we never got along. It was like always just like she could say, I love you, and I could say, okay, bye. Like I loved her, but I didn't like her. I didn't like my own mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so my husband brings me the script, and here now my son's like 25, 24, 25. He's out of, or he's no, he's in college. So he's got to be 22. And I look at the script that I hadn't seen since I was a little, kid. And I look at it and I went, holy shit, something's wrong. And when I read it as a mom, after already raising my son, and I looked at my husband at the time, and we were like, where do you go? Like, and I remember we went, I have a really good doctor I was really close to who knew my history, everything except for the missing piece, which was I had been fully alienated from my mom in plain sight. So it was like an unraveling like no other. The weird thing was my mom over the phone, we're about to get into another like mother and daughter, right? They normalize all this stuff, another mother and daughter argument. And how many triggers do you have? And I'm like, why don't you read this? And Greg sent it to her. And within an hour, my mom, it's like all of a sudden my mom she understood what the hell happened. She knew more than I could fully understand. And she like it went through the whole family. People were throwing up. They couldn't believe it. It was just like a lot. I went to see my counselor, my psychologist. She looked at me and she goes, Lisa, I don't know if we can help you. And I'm like, what the hell happened to me? What do you mean you can't help me? Like she's like, maybe EMT therapy. Like, I don't know. And luckily Greg was listening to a podcast, who was a spine surgeon who worked on necks, and we ordered his book. And what I had was a severe case of a lot of childhood trauma. So where do you go when this happens? Because where do you go? Like, you call the CDC. Like, I've been brainwashed. Where do I go? Like, we don't have any. Like, this is unprecedented. This has never happened before. Where do I go? Well, luckily, it's called the Hoffman process, and that's where everyone a lot of movie stars have gone there. And it works when you're older because you have that life experience. And when you want to heal, when you know something, I didn't want any of my stepmom staying any of her narrative in my life anymore. And so I went to the Hoffman process. It's not, all it is it's backed by Harvard, and it's like 7 days of intense therapy. And then for the rest of your life, you always are connected and you have a support system. And I remember going there, and I'll never forget it. They're like, I even brought a copy of the script that was downloaded, right? And they're like, Lisa, there's nothing wrong with you. What? No, you just survived. So the ages between 7 and 13 were so cool. Like, if I had to be brainwashed, if this had to happen, that it was so bad. But for some reason, between this 7 and 13, because of the way that the brain is programmed, that's when your fight or flight kicks in. So my body and brain were responding biologically correct to all this trauma, pushing it down, suppressing it. But what happens is when we don't address, like, emotional pain is no different than physical pain. But physical pain we can treat, right? We put Band-Aids on, we can neosporin. Emotional pain, what do you do with that? So it stays in the body until it's released. So 2 weeks after I had attended the Hoffman, because I was on Norco because I had broken my neck, I had never taken a Norco ever since. Still pain-free.
Now, what did they actually, I have one question before we go on to this. So the question is going to be, what did they teach you in practical steps? So if our listeners are like, okay, what do I do? Where do I at least start? The question is me, what did they teach you to start releasing this so you can get rid of the emotional, mental, spiritual, and then ultimately physical pain?
Like a total cleanse, right? Yeah.
Let me ask you one more question before we go there, just so we can tie things up. Your father gets the book for you. He brings the book to you. Surely he looked through it. What did he think when he handed it to you?
Well, we didn't talk for 3 years because he was like, she was just expressing herself. I don't think he couldn't. I think there was
he was in a tough place. He was in a tough place.
And now his kids are grown. They're not little anymore, right? And yeah, this was yeah, even no, even everybody had missed it. Even the psychologists that read it missed the signs. Nobody knew. Thank God my husband didn't throw it away. So
Yeah, and just if
um,
anybody's listening, that is shit advice from that counselor to throw it away. I've had counselors tell me stuff like that too. You don't want to be sitting there reading things, obsessing and dwelling in the past.
right.
But notes you took in journals and things you have to work you through that trauma are invaluable tools for you and for others. So to take something like that and toss it, that's just pure ignorance. And you need to get a better counselor, in my opinion, and from what
Right.
I've seen. And I actually got a master's in counseling just to, because I had
Yeah.
things going on in my life and I was trying to figure them out. So I wanted to dig in and I put my money where my mouth is. And I got a master's degree. And every piece of credible literature says you use those as resources and move forward. They're stepping stones. The Bible, 2/3 of the Bible is the Old Testament, gives us the history so we can live in the present for a great future. You know, there's a saying, if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it. So
Yes.
don't be tossing away invaluable things, but don't also be like living in it and being stuck in it. So find that
Right.
balance.
Like, yeah, because and again, like I was in mom mode. So it was like, I'm not going there, I just, because it's so painful. You don't want to miss it. You don't want to even think about it. So,
Yeah. So your dad
so,
gets your dad is in a shitty situation. I mean, he's stuck. That's his wife and
oh,
mother of his two kids. And now, but his firstborn daughter, she's like, he loves you both and he's stuck. And so, but then you guys don't talk for 3 years. So now you're
oh God,
finally,
yes. Oh man, it was like, because it was, you know, no matter how long your parents have been divorced, they will always repeat the same stories over and over again. And the older you get, then when you become, a parent yourself, and you just like, you see this cycle of like dysfunction, and it's not like they even realize it, or it was so horrible for me, because you have to realize throughout my life, no matter what, I still, like, I was so close to my dad, like nothing, even as horrible as my stepmom was, like my dad was still always there for me. Like he would take me, when I was pregnant, he would take me to my OBGYN, appointments. So my dad was the first person I told I was pregnant. I didn't tell my mom, I told my dad. So this was, for my dad, he was like, why, what did he say? Because once I knew, like, oh, I was totally brainwashed, son of a, just, you go through so many different emotions. I was so angry and just, just shock, and so much of unraveling. And my dad over the phone said, why are you listening to Greg and your mom? And he sounded just like my stepmom. And I remember Greg's like, don't throw your phone. And I'm like, I thought, I am so codependent over my dad. Holy and I, like, never again, like, because I knew, once you know what happened to you, then you can take control over your life. But when you don't know, it's a psychological mind map.
yeah.
So I remember I threw my phone and I broke it, but because I was so mad, and I didn't talk to my dad for 3 years. And it was a podcast that I did in 2022 that my dad listened, and he got it. And my dad came back into my life, and he understood what really had happened, because like he didn't want to believe it. You don't want to believe it. And it's like, no. And he hasn't wavered, and he is proud of me for just never, I never stopped. I mean, I didn't want to think about it as a child and even as a mom, but once I knew, I wanted to do everything I could to get this ugly destruction out of my life. And that's when I went to the Hoffman, and what they teach you there, it's that's the term is called negative love patterns. So as kids, we are, bound to our parents out of survival. And a lot of times parents aren't perfect. And so we pick up these negative love patterns. And it's basically like fake love, like pseudo love is like, I love you so much, but I need you to listen to me. Like, I need you to listen to me because I'm going through a lot. So a kid is having to be an adult. Or you have a parent that likes to smother and doesn't want their kids to grow, so they keep them stunted. Or there's all these different patterns that parents have. And so when you learn all this, and then you learn about your own patterns, and when you go through a lot of trauma and you like are the first kid in the world to grow up and figure out that holy crap, I was brainwashed and this is what happened. And because it took 40 years, but I was able to, release a lot of the patterns that were keeping me hostage in my own mind and my own heart, my own spirit. I'm not kidding. Like now it's called Mrs. It has to do when you can't hear, like when certain sounds bug you, people like, you'll hear like the scratching on a chalkboard and you're like, oh, right. So I would have like, I couldn't sit at a dinner table. I had to always have music on. I couldn't sit in the dark, and all these like patterns that just would kind of, they served a purpose to survive. But as an adult, it's like, yeah, why do I flinch every time a man tries to come and hug me? Oh yeah, because the stepdad was trying to play with your boobs when you're growing up, right? So you flinch. So we do all these things. That's because the body remembers. The body remembers. So when you get the script that was used to brainwash you, then it's kind of like a map, and you can go in and like this is where it gets fascinating, because you can see like how resilient and really how strong kids really are when you have to see like what a lot of kids are up against that they don't know. Like I had no idea that my attachment to my mom was vital. I thought that my stepmom saying how bad and writing how bad my mom was, I mean, when you read it, you can't blame me for not wanting to be around my mom, but my mom didn't deserve that. That's a total destruction of your safe attachment to a parent. And if you don't have a safe attachment to your parents, it's scary.
Yeah. Well, what about this? So, what did you do, or what was one of the things that really helped you move forward, Lisa? What was an exercise that our listeners can take and try at their house right now?
I had to let go a lot of anger. I had to, when you grow up, and most of us have grown up where we weren't allowed to express our anger. We weren't really allowed to express ourselves, right? You're a child. You don't know what you're doing. You're supposed to be seen, not heard. So being able to express myself in either a creative way, in an angry way. So let's just say, and you see things all over the place. Like when we get mad, a lot of us aren't taught that it's okay to be mad. We're not, parents don't teach us like, well, how do you get rid of anger in a healthy way? Well, go scream into a pillow. Go take a bat and hit something and get it out. Get it out of your mind and body. So being okay with being angry and releasing it in a healthy way. Sometimes I'll tell kids, oh, your parents make you mad. Mine make me really mad too. Get a plate, write everything down that you don't like about, say you're breaking up with someone, right? He's a jerk. She's mean. I don't like the whatever it is. There's no judgment, because this is your feelings. This is how you feel on the inside. Let's get that out. And then you write it all out on take a Sharpie, you write it out on a plate like from the dollar store, then go somewhere where you can break it in pieces and watch and watch and listen to your body. So I learned everything. I had to relearn everything from, like, my body always warns me, because what happens is you get these survival patterns really fast. I call them phenomenal because it's like, hey man, it got me here. They just that's why, like, when you see people on airplanes and they lose their shit and they lose it, they get really mad, and you see them like just going off on an airplane and people are like, what is going on? And I'm like, that's his inner child. Like something really happened back in the day for that person, or they could be like off their meds. But it's being able to express your anger. It was a real, I think, a real important, because we all have anger and that's okay. You cannot live without anger or anxiety. If you didn't have anger or anxiety, you would not live.
Mm-hmm. So now you go through this program that's around 22, and then now we're here today. Take us from that program and how your life progressed to where you are today, and then we'll transition to where you're headed.
Okay. So I attended the Hoffman in 2018. And then 2019, I went back for the yearly, not the yearly, I went back again for like graduate courses. I was still, because there was so much trauma. I remember we did an exercise and I kind of had like I had a emotional reaction, like a real emotional reaction. And they said, honey, we hold trauma in our bodies. We do? Yeah. Well, the doctors I've been going to the past 20 years, no one's ever told me that. No, really, we do. So I ended up getting a somatic therapist as well. And somatic therapy is where they work with the nervous system. So basically, my entire nervous system had to reshift for my survival. So when you work with the nervous system, you're working a lot with the mind and body and a lot of the pain from the past. So my healing was just beginning. So it's been 7 years straight. And in the 7 years, not only, so 2018 went to the Hoffman again in 2019, started seeing a somatic therapist. And then about 2019, right before COVID hit, I was struggling because I wasn't talking to my dad. It's unheard of, right? And I couldn't talk to him because I couldn't respect, like, this, just the parent in me. I was just too hurt. It was just too much. Like, my dad didn't want to accept, like, and this is part of healing when you have childhood trauma, is if, your parents or the adults take accountability, that helps. But when they deny it, that didn't happen to you. That's just gaslighting. That doesn't help. So I was starting to unravel, and I thought it was because it was my dad. No, I think my husband I don't think he thought I was going to snap out of it, because you literally come apart, where there was a time when I was sitting on the couch, at the edge of the couch, just kind of zoned out. Like, I didn't want to move. It's called fawn mode. Basically, it's where you're too afraid to go forward. You're too afraid to go back. So you're just going to stay and not do anything. That is a total trauma response. And so my husband did what a lot of men and women do. He met a person, didn't tell me. And I was so distracted by my own stuff that was going on, but my nervous system wasn't right. This wasn't right. So one night I lost it. Like, I just was tired of healing. I was missing my dad. I don't know what was going on, but I took some Xanax. I took like 8 pills, and I told Greg, and he took me to the emergency. And when you do that, they send you to a hospital where you have no rights, meaning if you try to hurt yourself, you go to a hospital and they keep you for as long as they want, and you have no rights. You have to take their meds. Luckily, I got out of there in time. I got out within 2 days. And when I got home, my husband was like not the same person. Like, the supportive husband that said, what do I do with this script? What do we do? It's like, we put it in the light. He was he was gone. Like he was there, but he was like, I'm going to be staying at my parents'. Why? Because what you did was wrong. You try to hurt yourself, and that's not okay. So he was like blaming me for doing what I did. So I was, this was a whole other unraveling, like, what the hell is going on? So all of a sudden, it was like the worst type of panic mode I've ever experienced. I didn't want to, I didn't want to take responsibility. Like I didn't want to believe that, like, why is he doing this to me? And I started somatic therapy, and I had this weird feeling. I was in the garage and someone, I just like heard this voice. I swear to God, I heard this voice. It said, Lisa, like, look in the garbage in the garage. There's just paper. Stick your hand in there. I swear to God, I heard that. Just stick your hand in there. It's like, stick my hand in there. And I see plane tickets. I'm like, plane tickets? That's not my name. So I go to social media and I Google and I see this like Brazilian chick. Like, I don't even know, maybe my son's age. And I'm like, do you know, this is my husband? And do you know him? And everything she wrote back was like every wife's worst nightmare. So now I'm in the middle of all this unraveling. And it was so bad. It was so bad. There was no way to reconcile that. It was like I lost my best friend, my husband, overnight. So now you're healing the trauma. You know what it is, but now you're divorced. You're going through a divorce. So that divorce opened up teenager Lisa. And that's when the somatic therapy, we did ketamine, which is a psychedelic. And that's when we went in. It's called, a lot of therapists use the word, it's sticky, the sticky stuff. The sticky stuff is like the stuff that was said, the trauma that sticks. It's really hard to get to because in order to heal from trauma, you have to feel it. And because this was so painful, it's just like when veterans go to war and they see some gruesome stuff. So I took the ketamine and oh my God, it was like, it was the best thing. It helped, and I was able to kind of shift and keep going from there. So now I'm over 2,000 hours of trauma therapy, which is a lot, but you know, you learn healing is like a sport. The more you do it, the more you get used to it. And it's all about it's all about your nervous system and understanding your nervous system and how to control your mind and body so you can integrate all of those parts. And then that's how you are whole, is that you integrate your emotional pain and your physical pain. Athena, that's my dog. And that's how I began the second trek of my healing journey.
Wow. Now, so between your birth and today, you've experienced a lot, and you've had a lot of highs and lows and trauma, like legit trauma that could stop a train. So now you brings us to today, where you just start unraveling this. You're going to the Hoffman. You're starting to, try to unwind the knots of your life. Then you go through a divorce, which alone can wreck someone. And then you said ketamine and somatic therapy. So talk about ketamine, because I've heard of it, but I don't know a lot about it. So somatic therapy is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's working on the physical body to release the emotional pain the cells heal. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. And then we use like modern neuroscience too. So it's both.
Yeah.
You're also reprogramming your brain as well. So you're integrating all aspects of yourself.
Yeah.
So Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you out. There's a delay. I apologize. But I was going to say, people, if you've ever got a massage and you're getting a massage by a good massage therapist, and then all of a sudden you just have this emotional trigger, like, where'd that come from? That's a kind of a small example of how the body holds. Like if you have a knot in your shoulder,
Yeah.
you get a knot for a year, and then a massage therapist works it out, and you start crying or you start having emotion. It's not from pain; it's from this memory being released. So there's something to it. I don't understand it. So talk more about that, and then talk about the ketamine. What is ketamine, and how does it work with somatic therapy?
So when you, I know I know it just this is a lot of trauma. More, I get it's a lot of trauma. You have to also understand it's like I don't know any different. I do now, and it's like holy shoot, that's brutal. And so basically, somatic therapy helps regulate and integrate the parts of us that are stuck. So when you're talking someone like me, and I know there's lots of people that have had a lot of trauma, and if you've never done somatic therapy, it is so crucial. And insurance companies don't even pick this up. So the best way is let me give you an example. So sometimes my somatic therapist will go, well, Lisa, where are you feeling this in your body? And sometimes I'll go like my throat or my heart. And I'll like have to put my hand on my heart there, and a lot of breathing into the emotion, the pain. And it's all for me because I have the script, because I know it's all from childhood. So it's basically every missing part that was not nurtured. That's what hurts. It's trauma isn't just what doesn't happen, what happens to you, but also what doesn't happen, right? So a lot of times I can't tell if I'm excited or scared, right? Because the nervous system gets all like excited. And so it's basically just going in and being courageous enough to go into the parts of us that were held like in kind of held suspended in time, like you're stuck. It's like if you don't if you don't release these emotions, you will be stuck there forever.
And so, what does the ketamine do
So
to
the
release?
ketamine is like, I call it the magic airplane ride, where it you could take it in a shot. I took it both, and you do it with your somatic therapy. And it's great because it shuts down the part of the brain that's always just like the subconscious. It slows it down, so it almost feels like, I swear to God, I thought like my brain was like going to shut down. It feels like you're like in a Battlestar Galactica, but basically you're kind of like outside of your body, but you're in therapy. So you're able to go in and see things from a different perspective. And then you use that new perspective and you integrate that part. And the only way to see that perspective is to go back. And the only way to go back when something is that painful is under like a hallucinogenic. This is why it works, because it also opens up the brain. It opens up the pathways so that you can, because our brains are like, they're plastic. So they'll keep growing as long as we keep moving and shifting upward. That's what our brains and bodies are meant to do. It's a miracle, really, the way that we're made. It's truly fascinating when you look at it, even though it's a lot of trauma. The fact that there is a way through it is what's so important, because nobody wants to feel the shame and the suffering because it hurts. And when we don't understand this basic, like we come with emotions, we come with tears, we come with anger, we come with anxiety. But when you're shamed for it, because a lot of generations, we only know what we know. And so that's why this is so important, is that trauma is a part of life. We won't escape. Like giving birth is traumatic, dying is traumatic, living can be traumatic. So there are tools and things that are now available, and it's just going to get better and better, because you can't really live your life full when you're constantly trying to heal something that you don't know you need healing.
Yeah. So now, between your birth and today, is there anything we missed or anything you want to share before we transition into where is Lisa today and where are you heading in the future?
No, just know that, you know, I was always, no matter as much trauma and BS and pain that I had to go through, my light, my essence was set. Like my foundation was set. And I can't look back at any point in my life. And there's so much more I could share, but let's just say, that's why I have a book. But what's good is that at the end of the day, I cannot look back and not see that there was bad, but then there was light. Like there was dark, but then there was light. And I didn't always know, why is this happening? Like I didn't always get the answer. Now I can look back and go, now I know why I went through that. Ah, now I get it. Ah, now I get it. So there's like it's almost like a full circle where I'm at today. You know that saying where you actually get to be the author of your own life? That's
Mhm.
literally what is happening today because I am embracing my past and my future, and no shame. Like we survive so that we can share, so that other people can survive too.
Amen. Amen. So, Lisa, if someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to reach you? And then also, where are you today? And specifically, where are you heading and how can we help you get there?
So thank you for asking. So, well, I am just finished. My book is right now it's in the publishing process. So the cover design is being made as we speak. My book is called Alienated: When Parents Won't Parent. And what I am doing is I am taking everything that was bad that happened to me and I'm using it for good. So I was alienated from my mom by my stepmom, and my dad didn't know to the extent. And today they both stand by me. They support the book, especially because I use what was used to brainwash me, because this is happening all over the world. Maybe is not as sick, but it still happens and it's still the same pain, because when we lose a parent, we lose a part of ourselves. We search for that throughout our lives. So I wrote the book, and it should be released by the end of May. And I'm excited because this is such a important topic, because it's about parenting and really what goes on for kids from divorce, because we know divorce is bad, but why is it bad? Why? Like, because it's different when you can co-parent. If my parents would have co-parented, if they would have put me first and not let my stepmom intervene, I would have been okay. I wouldn't have suffered the way that I suffered. So my son, he was totally co-parented. I mean, he is loved. There is not a doubt that he knows his mom and dad love him, and he's got supportive step parents. That's the best thing that parents can do for their kids, and stay away from family court. So where I'm at today is awaiting this book launch. I started the Stephood Project, which is to bring awareness for kids who grew up like me, where they might not even know. Like I didn't even know, because we just think it's normal for our parents to fight. But then when you feel uncomfortable in your own body around your parents, that's a big sign. That's a big sign that, okay, why do I feel uncomfortable? Well, that's, these are things that professionals and people need to know, so that this is why kids will numb and drink and hurt themselves. And when kids try to speak their voice, parents will say, "You don't know what you're talking about. You're brainwashed." So I'm like, no, 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 no. I understand them. I got them. So I'm like the bridge between the parent and the kids that are trying to understand each other. And so the book is there's nothing like it. It's a big wake up call for all parents who are struggling with kids who are alienated or estranged.
Awesome. So this episode, we're recording it the day after what most people call Easter in the United States, and then it will be released probably in May. So right alongside your book launch in 2023, May 2023. And
Yeah.
you can probably, I'm sure, is this going to be available on Amazon, I'm guessing. So we'll put a link in the show notes
Yeah.
once the book's released. And then you can check out, do you have a website, Lisa?
Yeah. So stephoodproject.org is my website. You can find me on Instagram, Lisa.Goodpaster. You can also find me on Facebook, Lisa Goodpaster, and TikTok, Lisa Goodpaster.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And now I got to ask, this is a question I'm sure our listeners are going to have too. Your stepmom, obviously, she's tied to your father and you don't want to hurt your father. But I mean, some of the things she did was actually criminal. And is she still with your father? Are they still together? Did they get
still
divorced?
Married. They're still married. And yeah, that's hard. I love my dad, and I don't want I can't sugarcoat it. It's wrong. There's no way somebody did that to my son. I'm sure his dad and I would have buried that person somewhere.
Yeah,
There's no way.
There's no good. Sometimes
it just sucks, because this is why it's so sad, because then you have it. When you hurt a child, you don't just hurt that child. You hurt everyone that loves that child. And like my siblings that I don't, they have, I have nieces and nephews I haven't met.
Yeah.
That's part of my dad. And so this is how sick it is. So no, she should be in jail. I could have, I mean, I don't know what she's going to do in jail, but I don't ever want to see her again. I would rather, it's like Cinderella backwards. It's like, you had no right to take my parents, and you did. And I'm still here. And I hope every step parent that is doing this, or every parent that is allowing this, scares the heck out of them, because it's a game changer. And it really brings parental alienation. You can't deny it. They're like, is parental alienation real? Yeah, it is. And nobody wants to believe the parents, but they'll believe a kid that can grow up and prove and not repeat what was done. And it's by the grace of God, and just love, that I was loved more than I was hated.
Amen. Yeah. And I can't help but thinking, there's tons of psycho parents too, not just step parents, that do the same thing. They lie, they manipulate, they warp.
Yeah. And that's why, like, okay, well, it's like, I'm glad it was my stepmom and my dad, is, they, call it the ostrich. They put their head in the sand, or however it is. But if it would have been a parent, I can't imagine that, because that's like,
yeah, the person who's by nature supposed to protect you. But yeah, it happens all the time. Husbands and wives get divorced, so the other one absolutely lies, manipulates. They do it passive aggressively. They set up the other parent to,
they're traumatized. And
the kids suffer.
Forever. You don't even. I mean, that's why my book is so important, because it really shows the consequences of the parents' behavior. And it's, at the end of the day, you can be your kid's best friend, and you can think that you're doing the right thing by talking bad about the other parent, but it comes back. And I mean, I'm just like, I'm shocked that it's happening at such an alarming rate, and we've been accustomed to it.
No, 100%. Like, you got people who are doing wrong, and they even go to counseling, or they're confronted with this stuff. And they're like, oh, so gentle, they're treated. And yet they're the sinner sinning against people. The people they sin against now have two bad choices. No matter what they do, like if you have a parent, like let's just go to adultery. Someone commits adultery.
Yep.
So now you stay in the marriage, and you have tons of baggage to work through. or you get divorced and you have tons of baggage to work through. So you didn't cause that sin, but you're dealing with the sin of the narcissist, gaslighter, the adulterer, the infidel, whatever book you read, whatever you want to call it,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But in every situation in life, it's like that. But our society right now, even within a lot of churches, they're trained to like let every form of sin go. And then if you're angry or upset about it, you're the one with the problem. Well, that's not what my Bible says. And when they meet God, they're going to get the truth. But when it comes to what you're talking about, whether it's a step parent, a parent, they screw and warp with children's minds, and they're going to have to face God for this. But right now on this earth, thank you for sharing your story of how badly it impacted you. So now hopefully some of our listeners who have the same struggles can follow up with you, get your book. They can maybe even get some of that somatic therapy, and they can be free and live a happy,
Right.
joyful life.
And it's waves, it's like, oh, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to go through it. And a lot of it, you'd be surprised, the older we get, it gets harder because we build up resistance. So, I just want your listeners to know, yeah, the first thing is awareness. Like, where in my life do I want to be a better parent? Do I want to be a better spouse? Do I want to be a better neighbor? And it's all possible.
All right. Well, thank you for being here today, Lisa.
You're
Ladies and gentlemen.
welcome.
Oh, yeah. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, check out our show notes. Get a hold of Lisa. Check out her book. If you have any questions, you can write us and we'll connect you to her, or you can reach out to Lisa directly through her website or social media accounts. But like our slogan says, don't just listen to great content, but do it. Repeat what you need to each day so you can have a great life in this world and most off eternity to come. So, Lisa, thank you again for being on our show and sharing your story.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great. Ladies and gentlemen, share this, like this, tell your friends about it. You know what to do. The goal isn't to get the podcast famous. The goal is to reach many people, to glorify God and to help you grow. So again, I'm David Pascal, and this is Remarkable People Podcast. Catch you in another episode. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.